Welcome back, it's Seth here. Have you wondered why you hear so much about professional athletes going broke? These athletes who have made millions and millions of dollars over their career, but in the end, they have nothing to show for it. Every time I hear an athlete filing for bankruptcy, I shake my head because this could be easily avoided if these athletes learn some good habits over their career. So in this video, I'll be discussing habits and factors that cause these super athletes to go flat broke. Also, I want to give credit to my friend Patrick for this video idea. As Patrick and I were discussing the upcoming fight of Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, there were some speculations on the internet saying that either Manny or Floyd did not have enough funds, so that's why they're doing this boxing match. So Patrick gave me an idea of making a video on analyzing why most athletes end up broke. Now, before I dive deeper into this video, if you could please hit the like button down below, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to help grow our channel. Now that you hit the like button, let's dive in. So to start off, what are the stats of athletes actually going broke? Well, back in 2009, Sports Illustrated published that 78% of NFL players face financial stress or bankruptcy within 2 years of retirement. They also mentioned that 60% of NBA players will file for bankruptcy within 5 years of retirement. However, players in the MLB are slightly different from the NBA and NFL. What they found was only 5 to 6% of MLB players will file for bankruptcy within 12 years of their retirement. These numbers are significantly lower than the NFL and NBA. However, this doesn't mean that these MLB players live lavishly. Most, if not many of these MLB players will be living paycheck to paycheck, just like most Americans. So to give you some examples of athletes who actually ended up going broke, and you actually may have heard of them, such as Vince Young from the NFL, who had an earnings of over $35 million over his career, however ended up filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2014. Then you had Warren Sapp, who had earned well over $82 million over his career, however ended up filing for bankruptcy in 2012. And then from the NBA, Antonio Walker had earned a whopping $108 million over his career in the NBA, however ended up filing for bankruptcy in 2010. And Malik Beasley, who's currently active in the NBA playing for Detroit Pistons, is also struggling financially. He has earned well over $60 million in his career, however is already in $8 million in debt and is facing wage garnishment for unpaid loans and bills. And from the MLB, Jack Clark, who earned well over $10 million over his career, has filed bankruptcy twice, and most recently in 2018. Bankruptcies are not limited to the NFL, NBA, or MLB. This kind of applies to most athletes from every single sport. One of the most well-known boxers, and I can almost guarantee you definitely have heard of this person, Mike Tyson, who is estimated to have earned well over $400 to $6 million over his career, filed for bankruptcy in 2003. Imagine blowing through that much money. I don't even know what I'd spend all this money on. And then Diego Maradona, who some people argue is one of the best soccer players or football players, depending on what country you're from, has also experienced a lot of financial troubles. In 2009, the Italian taxing authority came after Diego, asking him to pay $54 million in back taxes. Diego did not have this money, and this caused him to go into financial hardship, and in the end, resulting in him to file for bankruptcy. So a lot of these athletes that I talked about are pretty well known, so the news will cover any issues that these players are going through. However, there are a lot of athletes that do not even get media coverage, and they're either living paycheck to paycheck, or they're pretty much homeless. And a great example of that is Delonte West. I grew up watching Delonte West play with LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers. However, now he's homeless. So now if you're wondering what is causing these super athletes to file bankruptcy and live paycheck to paycheck, well, the first reason is that most athletes have a short career window. You may not realize how short of a career most athletes actually have. We hear about most famous players such as LeBron James, who's 41 years old, in his 23rd season in the NBA, and his stats are a lot better than most young players in the NBA. And then you have Tom Brady, who retired at the age of 45 and playing 23 seasons in the NFL. A lot of fans still want him to come back and play another season, and partially I think Tom does too. But here's the thing, Tom and LeBron are both outliers. Most athletes do not have that long of a career, and the average athlete actually really only has a short career window. From my research, I found that the average NFL player will have a career window of 3.3 years, and during this time, they'll earn an average of $9 million. For an average NBA player, you're looking at a career window of 4.8 years, with an average earning of $45 million. And then MLB players have the longest career window of 5.6 years and an average earning of $27 million. And the NHL is right behind the MLB with an average player having a career window of 5.5 years and earning $19 million over their career. NFL has a short career window for obvious reasons. There's a really high risk of getting a really bad injury, and there's a lot of wear and tear on your body. MLB is quite the opposite. There's a lot less contact, you have skill longevity, and most teams have a large roster. So an average player can still make good money over their short career window. Even over a short career window, an average athlete could make good money in one of these big leagues. And these are the average earnings over the career of a player. So there are players that will probably make less money. But in the end, most players will end up doing well in the time they are in the league. So even if an average athlete is making millions, this leads me to the second reason why most athletes end up being broke. And that is because of lifestyle inflation, and it literally happens instantly. When athletes hit the big league, most athletes feel like they have pressure to live a certain lifestyle and to show off all the money that they're making. This entails some athletes to go out and buy million-dollar jewelry with such shiny diamonds that you can see them from a mile away. And some athletes go out and buy flashy supercars, and some buy multiple. It has been reported that Floyd Mayweather has purchased up to 4 Bugattis over his career. I'll be honest, 1 is enough. Why do you need 4? Then, of course, an athlete has to go out and buy a super fancy house that is humongous and won't even use most of the house that they purchased. And last but not least, during the off season, they gotta show off their lavish vacations. Not just so that they can relax after a hard season, but to actually show off all the money that they're making. So the thing is, these athletes are making millions of dollars. So now their spending also becomes fixed at a millionaire level, even if their career only lasts a couple seasons. Most athletes struggle to think long term, and this was actually something discussed between Charles Barkley and Shannon Sharpe in an interview.
Sometimes I tell young people, you can afford that car right now at 20. Will you be able to afford that car at 60?
Yeah, that's the key.
The issue is once you get used to living to a certain lifestyle, it's really hard to scale back. Even if your career only lasts a couple seasons, the spending gets structured in a way that you think millions will keep coming in every single year. And that's where the danger starts. Also, not to mention, most athletes feel like they have a responsibility to help people who supported them growing up. These athletes may buy their parents a home, pay some loans of their siblings, or send money back home if they come from another country. And at first, this kind of support comes from a good place. But over time, this is when the financial pressure starts to grow. Friends may ask for business investments, more family may need more financial support, and some athletes even hire their friends to work for them to help them out during a rough time. Before long, the athlete isn't just supporting themselves, they're supporting 5, 10, or even 20 different people. And these financial obligations last a lot longer than the athlete's actual career. Now, moving on to the third reason why most athletes go broke, and this one may actually surprise you, is that taxes and fees actually takes up a huge portion of their income. When you hear an athlete sign a $10 million contract, it actually sounds like they're going to get $10 million at the end of that contract. But in reality, that's not even close to what they'll actually take home, and that's because of taxes. First, there's federal taxes, and this will take a huge portion of their income right away. Then, depending on what state the athlete's playing in, you'll have state taxes, and this could vary from state to state. Some have no state tax, and some have very high state tax. But most athletes in the US face even something more complicated, and that's called jock tax. This means an athlete is taxed in each state that they actually end up playing in throughout the season. So if an athlete or a team travels to multiple different states in 1 year, this means that this athlete will get taxed in multiple different states in just 1 year. And the thing is, taxes aren't the only deductions that most athletes face. Most athletes also pay an agent fee, and this agent fee is anywhere from 3 to 5% of the contract. Now that's a big portion right there. And when you add up all the taxes and fees, that $10 million contract is not what you actually take home. In most cases, athletes only take around 40 to 50% of their initial contract. So in this case, the $10 million contract means that they would only take home $4 to $5 million after paying all their taxes and fees. And if an athlete's career only lasts a couple seasons, this means this money has to last them their lifetime. Which is why it's important to understand the real take-home income for an athlete and for yourself. A lot of players don't account for these taxes and fees, and they end up blowing all the money that they get from their contract. And in the end, when the IRS and CRA come after them, then they run into financial issues. Now, this leads me into fourth reason why most athletes end up facing some financial troubles, and that is that most athletes make poor investment decisions. When athletes start making millions of dollars, they're approached with a lot of different investment opportunities. Friends, business partners, and entrepreneurs view these athletes as an access to a large amount of capital. And because a lot of these athletes are very young when they start making a lot of money, they really have no idea how to evaluate a good investment opportunity. As a result, these athletes invest into businesses that they don't even fully understand. For an example, it's so common for athletes to invest in restaurants, nightclubs, real estate development, cryptocurrency schemes, and startups started by their friends. Even best of the best athletes end up losing a lot of money today, such as Tom Brady, who lost over $30 million in the collapse of the crypto FTX. Curt Schilling invested $50 million of his own money into a video game company called 38 Studios, and this company ended up filing bankruptcy in 2012. And then you have Michael Jordan, who lost over $500 million by shorting GameStop stocks. Like, who would tell Michael to do that? Why? On the surface, these opportunities may sound exciting and an opportunity to make even more money much faster. But without proper research, you can lose millions and millions of dollars. And unfortunately, by the time most athletes figure out that their investment wasn't a good idea, the money's already gone. This is why most long-term investors invest in assets that they actually understand, rather than these new exciting business opportunities. If most of these athletes had just invested into the S&P 500, which earns an average rate of 10%, I can guarantee you they would have a lot more money today than investing into these quick, fun business opportunities. In general, most athletes lack financial education. Now, moving on to the last reason why most athletes go through financial hardship, and that is that the identity crisis that most athletes face when they retire. From a young age, these athletes' days are structured around training, practice, competition, and performance. Their identity is deeply connected with being an athlete. But eventually, every athletic career comes to an end. And when this happens, everything changes drastically. The income stops coming in, and the fame and the attention starts to fade. The daily structure that once defined their life also disappears. For some athletes, this transition is actually quite painful. And without structure, a lot of these athletes struggle to figure out what their next purpose is in their life after their career. And in some cases, spending becomes a great way to cope with this transition. Luxury purchases, expensive trips, and a high-end lifestyle can temporarily fill in that emotional gap that they feel after retirement. But the problem is that this type of spending continues long after the income has stopped coming in. So this results in a lot of athletes to go into financial hardship after leaving their career. However, there are some players that do get lucky and find a career that actually helps them become even more successful, such as Shaq, Charles Barkley, and Kenny, who are analysts. And then you have Tom Brady, who signed a 10-year contract with Fox for $375 million. However, at the end of the day, not every athlete can be that lucky. So these are the major reasons why most athletes end up going broke. And if you are not becoming an athlete or someone with a 9-to-5, make sure you follow this channel, as this channel will teach you how to save and invest and will help you to make sure that you do not go broke. So that's it for this video. If you guys truly enjoyed this video, please stay tuned for future videos. And until next time, remember to keep investing.